Well, Parliament is sitting in Canberra. You wonder, though, whether anything is raised or discussed about significant issues facing Australia. I'll keep repeating that Bowen is a dangerous advocate of a destructive energy policy which will cost the economy, it'll cost business profitability, it'll jeopardise our international competitiveness, and yes, it'll cost jobs, may send businesses broke. Bowen won't appear on this program. He wouldn't be able to cop the heat. It's worth repeating what Net Zero Australia have said in their report. As the title suggests, they are in favour of net zero, which in my opinion is an illusion. But even they have said, and I quote, you've heard me and I'll repeat it many times, climate policy remains in the grip of an intelligentsia that lacks the wisdom to recognise the boundaries of their own ignorance, unquote. Now, as I've said, with the government blundering on with an energy policy that will destroy the national economy, Bowen is a metaphor of those who can't, and I quote, recognise the boundaries of their own ignorance. Well, some eminent people are seeing the light. Tony Blair, now Sir Tony Blair, British Prime Minister of the UK for 10 years, has established the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. It's got 750 staff in 40 countries. It prides itself on saying 100 of its staff are currently, quote unquote, embedded in governments around the world and not in the back office. I don't know where they are here, perhaps someone knows. But the Tony Blair Institute has embarked on an audacious new project, the future of Britain. Now, there are some who say if Starmer is to win the election in Britain, Tony Blair will actually run the government. Well, this future of Britain, it's being said of Starmer that he basically is going to defer to Tony Blair, who's 70. And as I said, that Tony Blair will be running the country. Now, Blair spoke last year of, quote, this is significant, the gaping hole in the governing of Britain where new ideas should be, unquote. Well, is this a new idea? Tony Blair has entered the climate change debate. With mounting public concern about the rising cost of this net zero push, that is, abolish coal and gas, the nonsense about converting everything gas to electric, new homes won't be connected to gas, Tony Blair has warned about imposing even higher costs on consumers. Now, did you check your electricity bill? My peak power costs have gone up by 11%. I got them in the other day. The shoulder cost, that's between the peak and off, up by 30%, but the off-peak cost has gone up by 39.9%. Well, Tony Blair is warning of, quote, even higher costs on consumers, unquote, as a result of this net zero nonsense. And Tony Blair, former Labor Prime Minister, has warned against asking the public to do, quote, a huge amount to tackle climate change. And he's saying that Britain's unilateral policies have no real impact in the light of China's rising carbon dioxide emissions. Are you listening, you arrogant dope, Chris Bowen? Tony Blair recently said, don't ask us to do a huge amount when, frankly, whatever we do in Britain is not going to really impact climate change, unquote. I've said it repeatedly, and now Tony Blair is saying it, that Britain's unilateral decarbonisation targets make no sense in the absence of the world's major economies adopting equally binding caps. And he's warned, are you listening, arrogant Bowen, that Britain's net zero plans are dangerously expensive and will result in painful reductions in living standards for all but the richest. He says the net zero nonsense for us, that means abandon coal and gas, trust renewables, ban certain motor vehicles, change your appliances away from gas. We're being swamped with this rubbish, and so is Britain. Sir Tony Blair warns that these policies threaten Britain with economic decline, social instability, and the eventual failure of the decarbonisation effort. Tony Blair talks about extremely costly policies that are both unaffordable and unattractive. Well, as Net Zero Watch says of Blair's intervention, it's hopeful that Blair's pragmatic approach, quote, will open the door for a fresh debate that for too long has been seriously unbalanced, irrationally alarmist, and depressingly intolerant, unquote. And that's us on energy policy. Seriously unbalanced, irrationally alarmist, and depressingly intolerant. If our economy is to be saved, Bowen must go, and his ideological energy baggage should go with him.